Listen to that. Robins singing, blackbirds singing a long way over there. There's a wren as well. But these robins are really kicking off. Despite the fact it's a pretty dismal grey afternoon, wildlife is bringing me joy. And that's really what I'd like to talk to you about, because clearly we're struggling to find joy at the moment. Firstly, I trust you are all well and you're taking the advice seriously. Social spacing, self-isolation, repeatedly washing your hands. We've got to listen to the scientists at this stage and those who provide a conduit for that information and take it very, very seriously. My principal concern at this time of crisis is my elderly father. He's 87 years old. He has pre-existing conditions that make him extraordinarily susceptible to this virus. So myself and my family have spent the last week trying to put in place protocols and practices to do our best to protect him. But it's not easy. We're asking a man who lives by himself, who has daily routines, to change those routines rapidly, quickly, to change his mind and his practices to look after himself. And it's become a little bit of a struggle. And many of you, I'm sure, will be similarly experiencing that sort of thing. And now, of course, it's not just the elderly and the vulnerable who we will have to look after, it's our kids, because they've closed the schools. So at this point, there will be families indoors together, potentially self-isolating, and that is, the best word in the world, folks, a stressful situation. So we're going to need to find some sort of outlet, and I'm pretty much self-isolating. My stepdaughter's about to have to do that because of her mother's profession. She works in the medical profession. What are we going to do to stay sane and mentally healthy? Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be listening to those robins. I'm going to be looking at the celandines. I'm going to be spending time in my garden. I'm going to be connecting with nature, because I know that nature provides me with a cure for some of the ills that we all might face. So over the next days and weeks, because like many of you, all of my work has been cancelled and I'm going to be spending a lot more time at home, I'm going to do some Facebook Lives and use other platforms to communicate with you about how we can find some light in this appalling darkness. And for me, that light, I'm pretty sure, is going to be walking securely and safely in the woods, maybe meeting my elderly father, but keeping a safe distance and washing our hands afterwards, but knowing that in that environment we are relatively safe and it can be enormously rewarding. Spring is on the way. The wood anemones are opening, the celandines are opening, the birds are singing. You know, this is a time, paradoxically, where there's a great eruption of life, and that life should be solace for us. But it's not just about nature. I'm going to have time on my hands, and I'm going to need to be imaginative as to how I use that. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to read all those books that I've wanted to read for probably about the last 2 or 3 years, but I couldn't find an excuse to, because I had to read about natural history, the environment, and so on and so forth. So I might, if I come up with anything, give you some book reviews. If you're of a like mind, that might be useful to you. And the other thing that I'm going to do, and this is something that I've been hankering to do for a long time, is I'm going to start painting again, making something out of paint. Now, I'm not a great artist. I'm going to be learning on the job. But maybe there are many things in your life that you haven't found the time to do because you have, like all of us, been busy working. But now we find ourselves with time potentially on our hands. So I might show you a bit of my painting process. Could be quite embarrassing. I'm also going to be spending more time with my puppies. Dog walking is a great way of maintaining physical and, for me, mental health, and that can be done safely too. So I might show you some of my dog walks. I apologise immediately and in advance for their behaviour. They're 9-month-old poodles. They haven't got blood, they've got anarchy coursing through their arteries and veins. You may not be a painter, you may be a writer, you may be a poet, you may be a photographer. So what I thought another thing we might do is get people to post their photos that they're taking on a daily basis. They don't have to be posh with big fancy lenses. They can be things that you find in your garden or in that green space which you're safely able to visit. We might get people to post their drawings or even cartoons of wildlife as well. And then lastly and critically, this is also an opportunity for wildlife, because citizen science, as we know, can play a very important role in our understanding of those wildlife's populations and distributions, and therefore how we conserve it. So rather than just enjoy that wildlife and listen to those robins singing and everything else, why not send in your reports, become part of a community, find friends online. If you can't find them in person, they are out there, and we can establish those online communities which are safe to use and whereby we can share our passion for wildlife. There's one last thing to say, and that is obviously when it comes to campaigning. I'm involved in a number of very serious campaigns at the moment. I think that it's important that some of those campaigns continue, but we have to be realistic about their preeminence at this point. I'll be very honest with you. There is no point in us continuing to batter the government to instigate certain very important changes at this time. They've got their hands full. We have to be sympathetic for the fact that this crisis has come upon them with as much surprise and devastation as it's come upon us. So some of those campaigns will continue to run, but we will basically step back a little bit and show sympathy for those people who need time to think about their outcomes. So rest assured that we are focused very clearly on dealing with the crisis that we currently have and making sure that that's addressed to the benefit of everyone. And lastly, there's Wildlife Rebellion, and we'll be saying more about this in the forthcoming days. We were about to launch, but the campaigns we were about to launch are no longer appropriate at this point in time. This is a time where we need a coming together of community. This is where we need to be working very much together. Even if we have opposing views about some things, we don't want to exacerbate those at this point in time. If the old lady who lives down the road on her own, who supports fox hunting, needs some food from the local supermarket, I'm going to go and get it for her, because that's the sort of mindset that we need to embrace. We need to lay some differences to rest and work together to get through this. But one thing's for sure, I'm going to be using nature to help me. So any contributions that you want to make, any ideas that you might have about how I can help you and others get through this would be most appreciated. Just let me know on Facebook, on Twitter, and we'll get going. I look forward to it. And in the meantime, stay safe, keep your distance, wash your hand, no unnecessary journeys. You've heard it all before, you don't need me to tell you, but I feel compelled because I'm just worried about my dad. Good night.